All right, so let me go ahead and show you that the pattern that we're going to use for this exercise. It's going to be on the low D. And the pattern that I'm using an alternate pick, but just two real quick ones. Ba-da, ba-da, ba, ba-da. And the pattern that you're going to hear is a double. And then after that first double, it does a double, single, double repeating pattern. So you get the first one, and then double, single, double. And here, listen closely, it sounds like this. Once again, the first double, and then a double, single, double repeating pattern. And at the very end, we hit the first fret, 3 notes in a row. And once again, you're going to have to alternate pick those with the downstroke starting at 1, 2, 3. And when you start every time you start the riff, make sure that you start it with the downstroke. And that'll help you keep control and keep your place rhythmically within the song. So I'm going to go ahead and play it again, nice and slow, going through the open D, and then playing first the turnaround on the first fret, and the second time around we'll be playing the turnaround on the third fret. Basically using the same pattern we used earlier for alternate picking, only this time around we're syncopating with the kick drum. Now I also want you to notice what my left hand is doing, especially on those open strings. I'm muting it to create a real staccato feel. So after every small section, the double, the single, the double, you'll see my fingers will lightly rest across the top of the string, muting it. So in the beginning, double, double, single, and you'll see it goes like this. And in between each one of those phrases, it's really important to mute with the left hand. And getting the coordination on that, it's a little difficult at first, but it's definitely worth it in the long run, because that's how you get those really tight moments with the kick and the snare, and also with your guitar player. All right, so there you go. Let's bring it up to speed, and let's play along with the guitars and the drums, and try to make this syncopated riff just as tight as you can make it and as powerful as you can make it. All right, now that you're getting used to syncopated rhythms, let's go ahead and make them a little more complex. In this example, we're going to throw in the octaves. This is just an example of that'll help you not only find the octaves within the syncopated rhythm, but also string skipping, because the riff does move pretty quick. So this is a good example of, when you're playing that low, when you switch up, moves pretty quick. Also, when you do it on the first fret, So you're skipping over this middle string right there. And to effectively use octaves, especially at these faster speeds, that's an essential skill to master, is skipping over and coming back quick. So we'll start slow, get used to playing it slow, and then we'll speed it up. So here's the riff. Really the same as it was before. Same rhythms. All we're doing is adding in a couple of different note choice changes, and that's just the octaves. But it's the same rhythm patterns that we were doing earlier. So starting on the low. So basically what you hear me doing on the octave is I'm choosing to play a set of the doubles on the octave. I believe it's every third set around. And then you get the. So instead of the three notes being down here, on the third one, boom, 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 I'm throwing in the octave at the top. So I'll play it again slow, and we'll go through the whole riff. Now, as you play this, or even listen to it, you'll hear a couple of things. The examples that we've set before you, the first half of it has a guitar just playing whole notes, so you can see the way the bass and the drums can act independently. And then we go ahead and take the same example, but put the heavy guitars over it, playing along, and you can also see the interaction of how the octaves actually enhance what the guitars are doing and really create some motion, even though you're still playing the same notes. You really haven't left what's going on within the song. You're still playing that solid rhythm, you're still playing the foundation, but you're using octaves to change things up a little bit. So check it out here coming up with the guitars and the drums. Let's play it all together and make note of these little nuances that we can add by using octaves with the syncopated riffs. All right, so now that we're doing syncopated riffs with octaves, let's go ahead and throw in the fifths. And once again, I'm going to keep it simple. We're going to use the same chord changes that we've been using previously for this exercise. We're even going to use the same rhythm as far as where we place them within the riff like we did with octaves. But now we're going to keep the octaves in there, but every other one we're going to go ahead and throw in a fifth. So it makes it more interesting, and you can also kind of hear how the fifths, once the guitar comes in, chugging away, you hear how the fifths kind of sit in with those rhythms. And once again, those guitar riffs are power chords, and power chords have fifths in them. So, once again, you're just enhancing what's already happening within the chord of what the guitar player is already doing. So for this exercise, once again, we're using that same riff and rhythm that we were using earlier. Slightly different pattern because we're throwing in the fifths. So I'm going to go through it slow. Follow along. And once again, I like using the fifth at the 7th fret for a little control there. So we've got the low D, we throw in the octave on the first change, and then the 5th, and then go back to the octave. So I'll do this pattern again. And then for our turnaround, when we hit the 1st fret here, we go 1, 2, 3, and our 3rd note, we're going to go ahead and throw in the 5th on that one. And so going from one into the other sounds like this. And then when we do it again, we're going to keep the same pattern on the D. But now when we go to the 3rd fret, we're going to go ahead and keep the octave in there, just like we did before, just so you get used to alternating, and also it kind of allows you to hear how doing it with the 5th sounds a little different than when you do the same pattern with the octave. So I'm going to go ahead and go through the whole pattern again, nice and slow, and then we'll play it up to speed with the guitars and the drums. Here we go. So there you go, that's the pattern. Now we're going to go ahead and play it along with the guitars and the drums. And once again, playing it as tight as you can. Keep conscious of your left hand muting. And also, as you play, notice how the feel of the 5th and the octave affects the chord sequence and the whole vibe of how the track sounds. And that'll give you an idea of when you can use 5ths and octaves and make the most out of them as well. All right, so now I want to show you another technique on bass, and that's using slides. Slides can be used in a lot of different ways. It's a very cool effect, and for the way I'm going to show it to you right now, we're going to use slides to transition between octaves to create a sort of haunting effect. And it's a great way to maintain a tonal center for your band, once again having that foundation as a bass player, but also having a very cool sound to go with it. And when you do that, you can lay down such a strong foundation that it can allow your guitar player to, float over the top, do some different kinds of chords and riffs, and really opens it up when you're holding down a solid rhythm. So for this example, we're going to be starting on the 2nd fret, which effectively is an E note. And we're going to be alternating the slide between the 2nd fret here and then 12 frets up at the 14th fret up here where we hit the octave. And in the middle of it, there'll be a little turnaround every 4. So you'll see it goes starting down low, 1, 2, and then you slide up and hit the third. Sounds like this. I'll do it again, but a little bit slower. And if you notice too, I do a little bit of a slide down as well. It sort of creates a whirlpool effect, if you will, just something where the sound of the low end is kind of moving around. But once again, the whole time you're really staying focused on keeping those root notes at the core of the riff. And then we went ahead and threw in a little turnaround in the middle. The first time it's a 3, 3, 5, 3. So it sounds like this. And the second time around, we do a 5, 5, 3, 5, just to change it up a little bit. And it sounds like this. All right, so now you know the pieces of it. I'm going to play it all together, nice and slow. As you can see, even by itself, it sort of has a haunting overtone to it. But when you add the guitars and a really laid-back, sort of a reflective drum beat, it can create quite a soundscape for a very powerful riff. So let's go ahead and introduce the guitar and the drums back in, get this slide going, and just play it as consistently as possible and really try to make the slide sound pop out, because that's part of what really gives it the motion to it. And once again, keeping that tonal center on the E. All right, here we go. All right, the next thing I want to cover are hammer-ons and pull-offs. I use these a lot in my bass playing, and they're a really effective way to get those really fast riffs happening. And they also kind of have a cool tone on their own as well. So first, I want to show you what a hammer-on is. A hammer-on is when you play a root note, and then your next note that you play, you actually, instead of picking it, you let your finger make the tone. And a lot of times hammer-ons are fast, so to effectively show you, I'm going to have to speed it up just a little bit. So here's a hammer-on the 5th fret, on the low string going between the 3rd and the 5th frets. You can also use, instead of your 3rd finger, you can use your 4th finger, especially down lower on the neck, you know. If your hands aren't quite big enough on bass to make the stretch from the 1st to the 3rd, don't feel bad about using your pinky. In fact, having a strong pinky is very helpful when you're playing bass guitar. So instead of the 3rd, if you want to use your pinky, you can do it like this. So here's a little exercise to develop a real clean hammer-on attack. I'm going to go between the 3rd and the 5th fret on the low string and then on the high string, and just go back and forth. The first time around, I'll do it using my 1st and 3rd fingers. The second time around, I'll use my 1st and 4th fingers. And you can use this technique too to strengthen up either one, whichever one you feel more comfortable with. All right, so here we go. You see what I'm doing there? I hit the one hit there, and the finger makes the note on the second hit. And then when I switch strings, once again, I hit I play that first note, and then I allow my finger to make the second note happen. So I'll do that again. Here we go. And also, I find it can be really easy to use the pinky instead. So I'll do the same thing using the pinky. Now, instead of covering 2 notes, you can also do it covering just 1 note. So right here, we're just going to go from 1 note to the second. Well, I don't mean 2 notes. Instead of covering 2 frets, we can just cover 1 fret. So right here, we go 1, 2, 1, 2, just using the first and the second fingers. Same kind of exercise. It's a good way to do, good way to learn how to do hammer-ons so you can learn how to do them nice and clean. Now, let's go ahead and take this same pattern and we're going to learn how to do pull-offs. For pull-offs, it's basically the opposite of a hammer-on. You play that note, and then as you pull off, the note that your finger's already resting at will be the note that's expressed. You do it fast enough and it'll sound like this. So what we'll do is we'll start with the low string and alternate between this one and the second string, and we'll be going between the 5th and the 3rd fret, and I'll start first with my 3rd and 1st fingers, and the second time around I'll do it with my pinky and 1st fingers. Sounds like this. So if you didn't catch that, I'll do it one more time. Once again. And we can also do this between just 1 fret. Instead of going across 2 frets, we can do it right here like we did earlier with the hammer-ons, but this time we'll do the pull-off exercise. Now, if you speed up, it helps you gain a little more control of it. And that's a good way to do it too, because after you get it slow, you should speed it up, because a lot of times hammer-ons and pull-offs are used over fast riffs. A good way to tighten up your internal rhythm is by playing with a metronome. If you don't have one, you can download a metronome on the support site, and that's just a great way to enhance your own internal timekeeper. All right, now that you've learned how to do hammer-ons and pull-offs, as well as some good syncopated rhythms and some alternate picking, we're going to start incorporating those into some heavy driving riffs, and we're going to go ahead and put them in sort of a song structure. The riff that we're going to use to employ these examples is a chorus, verse, chorus type of rhythm that you'd find in a lot of metal music. So as we go along here, it's going to move pretty quick. We'll start slow, but do notice how the sound of the hammer-ons and the pull-offs really affect the way the flow of this song is. So let's go ahead and take it from the top. I'm going to start with the riff, starting with the open string, and we'll just take it piece by piece and slowly break it apart and learn the song. Here we go. Starting off the top, we do the open riff, and it's alternate picking pretty much all the way through. So it'll do 1, 2, 3, and then there's a hammer-on right there. So once again, it goes like this. After that section, we follow it up with a pull-off rhythm. The pull-off rhythm goes like this. So it's 2 pull-offs, and then we hit that riff. So those 2 together. And it goes back again to this hammer-on riff at the top. And then we do this down here in context. Once again, bum, 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 bum. So I'll play this first section again slowly. All right, and it starts over again. And then we play a little chord turnaround, and it goes like this. All right, so once again, that's go 3rd, 6th, 5th, 8th. So I'll play this first half all together slowly. All right. And then we play the riff pretty much the same way again, only at the end this time, slight variation on the chord. We end it down on the 1st fret as opposed to the 8th fret. So I'll take that whole little section again, and we're going to call this basically the chorus riff of this example. All right, so now let's go to the section that to me sounds like a verse riff, something you do as a verse riff. It's very syncopated, it's very punchy, but we also have the use of the hammer-ons and pull-offs in this section too. So to play this riff, and also if you'll notice in relation to the guitar, I also employ some octaves and some fifths in the chorus riff. So really at this point we're really starting to employ a lot of the different techniques and tools that we've worked on in the beginning, and now we're applying them to some really heavy metal rhythms. So here we go. This is the second half, the second section of the example that we're working on. So to play this section, we're going to start off on the low D string, and then we'll go to the octave. So you get the 2 downstroke, and then a little alternate picking upstroke. And it's very syncopated, so you're going to have a lot of that where you're playing the solid downstrokes and then every once in a while throwing in the alternate picking technique where you get the little quick hits. And so that's the very beginning of this one. Once again, I'll play that little first section slowly. And you're getting in that fifth over, the guitar player's playing an F chord, and so, you have the choice. You could go, but I like throwing in the fifths whenever possible, and that's another good example of throwing it in right there. So. And then the next part of the riff starts off similar, and then we throw in a hammer-on technique. So here's the next section on it by itself. All right, now let's go to the third section. The third section, real similar to the first section, does this again. And then for the fourth section, the last little portion of this, this verse-type riff, we have a little turnaround that once again employs hammer-ons and pull-offs. It goes like this. So now I'll do this whole section as one piece, slow. All right, so there's that riff. Playing this riff with the riff I showed you earlier will constitute this whole example. So we got the first riff, this riff, and then the first riff again. Now, I know it's a lot of notes, but don't get too discouraged because not only just take it slow and learn it, but you can also access the tab that corresponds to this program and also the other lessons throughout what we're doing here. So, so take your time, learn it right, speed it up, and rock it out. Let's go ahead and rock it out again with the guitars and the drums. All right, this is a very challenging piece that we're going to be working on here. It illustrates how you can play really tight with the guitar player, especially a single note riff, and with you and the guitar player really locked together, it can create just a massive wall of sound and just sound really powerful. Now I know earlier we've been talking about fifths and octaves and different ways to sort of step outside the box. Well, this is an example of really staying in the box and just being really tight and just slugging away the riff as tight as you can. And it's also a great example of using the hammer-ons and pull-offs for some really quick passages. Plus, at the end of the riff, there's a little syncopation going on. So a couple different examples of what we're doing. It moves really quick, but we'll start slow and work our way up. So to play this riff, we'll start with the open low D. It starts with a double hit, and then we go right into a hammer-on riff. So I'll take it a little slower. One more time. The next section after that is also a little hammer-on riff. Once again. So I play that first one, get the hammer-on in there, and then another hammer-on. Up to speed, it looks like this. And then it goes back to the first riff again, the first little section. And the second time around, it's real similar to the first time around, but instead of coming down, we end the note on the 5th fret up here. So, once again. A little faster. And then it goes back to the first riff again. And it goes to the second one I showed you earlier. And then it plays a syncopated turnaround on the 3rd and the 1st fret. All right, so let's go through the whole riff, putting all the parts together at a moderate speed. Now, because this riff is so challenging, I'm going to go ahead and play it up to speed, but without the guitars and the drums, so you can hear how the riff is played just me by myself with the bass, okay? Here we go. All right, so there you go. Now let's go ahead and rock it out with the guitars and the drums. Heavy metal and rock music is normally characterized by very aggressive distorted guitars and some pounding drums. So, in my opinion, the role as the bass player is to not only link the drums to the guitars, but also enhance and focus a lot of what the guitar is doing, especially when you're playing those really heavy riffs. So, for me, I like generally a very clean, aggressive, bitey tone, but with a lot of low mids for that punch. And to me, that, helps set the bass in nicely with the guitar, and you have your own space, but also got enough low end to where you can lock in with what the drummer's doing, especially with his kick drum. All right, I want to talk with you a little bit about how I get my sound, both in the studio and live. Generally, I play through an amp, and I also run what's called a DI box. The DI box is really just a tone, a line that comes straight off the bass right to your mixing board. And then with the amp, you use a good solid microphone, a good quality mic to catch what the speakers are doing. And what we usually do is we mix those two tones together. The amp sound gives it a lot of push, sometimes a little bit of grit. Meanwhile, the DI sound can be a real clean, clear representation of what you're playing. Mix those two tones together and you can have just a great bass tone. And like I said, I'll do that in the studio and I do it live. Sometimes in the studio also, I'll add a little bit of distortion on a third track. That can help give it a little presence in a mix, especially if you've got a lot of distorted guitars going on and you're going through a real fast section. But whatever works for you is what works for you. So definitely experiment and see, what you prefer. In my opinion, when you're looking for amps, you want to get an amp that has a great tonal characteristic that you like without having to tweak it too much. Because if you're having to really crank the knobs one way or another, maybe the sound you're looking for really isn't in that amp. So to me, you want to start with an amp where you run it all flat and you're getting a good tone, and then from there, you can do the tweaks and you get the most out of your equipment. Now, me personally, I use custom amps and I use Traven guitars. The Traven Havoc guitar that you see here, I actually helped co-design, and it's got a lot of features that I like about it. And the amps that I use by custom are also the kind of amps where I don't feel like I have to tweak them too much. I feel like the sound that I get out of them is pretty much running it flat, and it's a nice, clean, powerful tone with the low mids and the low end that I like to have. But you always want to remember, the most important part about playing an instrument is that it's fun. So have fun playing your instrument, take those opportunities to be creative, jam with other people, get a band going, get on stage, and hopefully I'll see you soon.